Are you an unpublished author with a book idea or concept that you'd like to get published? Need help with editing, copywriting, formatting, and other tedious tasks that are required to successfully publish a great book? Fast-track your next book release with Just Because Publishing. Just Because Publishing specializes in helping new and unpublished authors convert their manuscripts into completed published works that are featured on Amazon, Audible, and other major retail platforms. Ready to get started? Email justbecards@gmail.com or visit justbecards.com for more information. Just Be Cards, creating a buzz just because. Good evening and welcome to a special 4th of July episode of Live with Dr. Andre. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and for supporting the ArtistFirst radio network. We sincerely appreciate your listenership. Tonight's episode of Live with Dr. Andre is sponsored by Just Because Publishing. Just Because Publishing specializes in helping unpublished authors convert their manuscripts into completed published works that are featured on Amazon, Audible, and other major retail platforms. Visit justbecards.com for more information. In tonight's special episode, I'll be discussing last week's presidential debate, the state of the Democratic Party, and what I believe is the best strategy moving forward if the Democrats want to ensure victory in the upcoming presidential election. But first, a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in tonight's program are those of the host. They do not explicitly reflect nor represent the views held by this broadcaster. The ArtistFirst Radio Network or its affiliates cannot be held accountable for any views expressed during this program. Also, while I do have a background in politics, I'm not currently affiliated with any political action committee or lobbyist groups, nor am I a political strategist or a paid campaign consultant. I'm merely a citizen who's concerned about the outcome of this election and the future of our democracy. So by now, we've all seen or at least heard about the recent debate between President Joe Biden and the presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump, which took place last Thursday. Politicals and talking heads have had a field day this past week with commentary on Biden's performance, citing his lack of energy and apparent incoherence at certain moments during the debate. This has caused a lot of his supporters and many within the Democratic Party to question his ability to not only win a second term, but also to continue leading our country as commander-in-chief. As I stated earlier, the purpose of tonight's broadcast is for me to give an honest assessment of where we are and what I believe the Democrats could do to regroup, regain momentum, and win the election in November. For those of us who saw the debate, we can pretty much agree on two things. Number one, Biden did not do well. And two, Trump actually did better than we all thought he would. I thought he was quite poised throughout the debate. He didn't overtalk his opponent or the moderators. And considering this is Trump we're talking about, I think he adjudicated himself fairly well. Now, let's be clear. Trump gave a lot of misinformation throughout the 90-minute debate. And I think that's in step with everyone's expectations. Trump is not exactly known for being a reliable source for truthful and accurate information. And, I think to fact check him at this point is counterproductive, because history has shown us that Trump supporters are simply not interested in factual data. They're just going to choose to believe anything that he says, and they have this blind loyalty to him. Biden supporters, on the other hand, are much more splintered. Of course, Biden has his core base of supporters who they aren't so much true Biden supporters as they are staunch Democrats who typically vote along party lines in each election anyway. But Biden, particularly in his first term as president, he has not enjoyed the same loyal support base that Trump has, even with Trump's legal challenges. And after the disastrous debate performance, Biden's support, which, if we're being honest, it was lukewarm at best, even before the debate, it has lessened even more. Right now, the Biden campaign is in full-fledged damage control mode and is doing its best to convince his top donors and voters that Biden can still win the election and endure a second term in office. Now, I don't know how many of you watched the entire debate, but if you're a Biden supporter or at least rooting for him, it was very difficult to watch. Yet somehow it was still entertaining at the same time. I even found myself literally laughing out loud a few times, not to take away from the seriousness of what's at stake for our country, but some of the rhetoric that came from these two was just hilarious. Take a listen at a few sound bites that we put together from the debate.
What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people, they cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. That's why you had no terror at all during my administration. This place, the whole world is blowing up under him.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true.
But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He ran because it was his last chance. He's not equipped to be president. You know it, and I know it. It's ridiculous. We have a debate. We're trying to justify his presidency.
We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment.
This shouldn't be a debate. He's the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the history of our country. That I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way, and I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
And I tell you what, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea if you lose again, you accept anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant. I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one.
You see what I mean? There were some really funny moments in this debate, especially some of the stuff that Trump said. You know, if you were just to, for a moment, forget the existential threat to our democracy that another Trump presidency will cause, you could almost appreciate the humor in a lot of his speech. And, you know, of course, there are a lot of negative things that I could point out about Trump, but you know what? You can learn something from anybody. There are a few things that I can appreciate about Trump. For one, he projects confidence. It doesn't matter if what he's saying is conjecture, a mistruth, a half-truth, or just a flat-out lie. He speaks with such confidence and conviction that is very believable. So if you're a sheepish individual or someone who allows themselves to be spoon-fed information without fact-checking or doing your due diligence, then I can understand how you could be susceptible to a candidate like Trump. And if you juxtapose that to Biden during that debate, he didn't come across confident. His voice was hoarse the entire time. He was struggling to stay on message and keep a clear train of thought. Every time he spoke, if you were rooting for Biden, every time he spoke, you were just on edge, hoping that he would just be able to drive home his point without stammering or losing his train of thought. It was just an ordeal. So for me, Biden did not project confidence during that debate in the way that Trump did. And in turn, that directly impacted the level of confidence of his supporters. It's one thing to be the underdog if you're running against a sitting president, but an incumbent president running for re-election should never come across as the underdog. That's just not a good look. So something else I can appreciate about Trump, he's masterful at honing in on issues that resonate with his base and then tailoring that messaging accordingly. So if you go back and watch the debate, Trump had a clear and consistent theme that he reinforced every single time he had the floor. One of those points was Biden is the worst president in history. He kept hammering that point over and over. Another one was Biden is ruining our country. He made that pretty much the core central theme of his message. And then, of course, he kept hammering that Biden is weak on immigration. Take a listen at how Trump made these points the central theme of his message throughout the debate. Take a listen.
Throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime. I call it Biden migrant crime. He caused inflation. As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in our country before. He's destroyed our country. Now all of a sudden he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. The worst president in history by far, and everybody knows it.
So what are black jobs? What are black jobs and what are Hispanic jobs? That's what I would like to ask President Trump. But did you notice the clear theme in Trump's messaging? It doesn't really matter if what he said is true or not. Trump understands that if you tell a big enough lie, people are just going to go with it. He basically took all of his flaws and made them his opponent's flaws. So the first thing, many respected political scholars and experts have overwhelmingly concluded that Trump was by far the worst president in American history. That's a documented fact. Another thing, many could argue that Trump is ruining our country, from inciting an insurrection, interfering in elections, nominating ultra-conservatives to the U.S. Supreme Court and other federal courts, long-standing rights and laws being overturned. Just recently, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump has now absolute immunity on election subversion charges. So we're really watching democracy unravel before our eyes. And in terms of Biden being weak on immigration, I can understand why a lot of people feel that way. But in my opinion, Trump is way too extreme on immigration. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with regard to immigration reform. What we're seeing happening at our borders is completely unacceptable. And to be fair, there were record numbers of border crossings under both administrations. But there has to be some sort of middle ground. You know, we don't need to be putting people in cages or ripping families apart, being inhumane in our enforcement of border patrol. We don't need that. We can be assertive in our policies and in our approach with respect to the border without being barbarous. But back to the point I was making earlier, I think Trump did an excellent job turning his weaknesses into his opponent's weaknesses. That was very, very clever of him. Trump basically bombarded Biden with so many attacks and lies that it put Biden on the defensive. So Biden was constantly having to defend his record, number one, and his accomplishments. And when he wasn't doing that, he was trying to fact check Trump and debunk every lie he told in real time, which is impossible because virtually everything he says is untrue. So the bottom line is that for me, Biden did not do a good enough job of reminding voters of his accomplishments in his first term or what he planned to do in his second term. There was no consistent messaging or compelling reason that he gave the public to reelect him other than I'm a better option than Trump. So look, this is where I feel we are right now. Biden was struggling with support for reelection even before the debate. Post-debate, it's even worse. USA Today reports that 41% of Democrats now say that the Democratic Party should replace Biden as its presidential nominee. That includes 37% of those who say they plan to vote for him. And look, I understand that to save face, the Democratic leadership is likely going to remain loyal to President Biden. But the hard truth here that no one wants to admit is this. Biden is going to lose against Trump in November. If Biden continues his campaign for re-election, Trump will likely be elected to his second term as president. In my opinion, that's the hard pill that we just don't want to swallow. But now is not the time to bury our heads in the sand or look the other way, save face, have blind loyalty, be delusional. Biden is up for a humiliating defeat and a tarnish to his legacy in November if he continues this pursuit. We appreciate his decades of public service to our country, but like the recent New York Times editorial stated, to serve his country, President Biden should leave the race. Now, I know how awful that sounds and how it can come across as unpatriotic and maybe even ageist, but we're at a unique place in our history. And this is a critical decision point for our country in terms of what direction we're headed in and what will become of our democracy moving forward. Right now, we're going to take a brief commercial break and hear a word from our sponsor. And when we return, I'll give details on what I believe will be the best strategy for the Democrats moving forward if they want to ensure victory in the upcoming presidential election. You definitely won't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show, and thank you for returning after the break. You're listening to a special 4th of July episode of Live with Dr. Andre. If you're just joining us, we've been discussing the recent presidential debate, its significance in shaping the election, and the future of our democracy. Now, before the break, we came to grips with the difficult reality that, given Biden's recent debate performance, the overall perception among many Democrats and supporters is that Biden should bow out from his bid for re-election and rest his legacy in decades of public service at the end of his first term as president. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about who could replace Biden as the nominee, from Gavin Newsom out of California to Gretchen Whitmer, Michelle Obama. Those are just a few of the names that have been thrown out as potential contenders. Now, Gavin Newsom, he's okay, but I don't necessarily think he could defeat Trump. Plus, I can't with the bleached teeth and the perfect hair that doesn't move. I think that running for senator might be a more appropriate fit for him. Now, Gretchen Whitmer, I don't really know much about her, aside from being the governor of Michigan. I mean, political insiders and news media know who Gretchen Whitmer is, but the average American citizen does not know who she is. You know, she just doesn't have the nationwide name recognition to be, I think, a viable opponent against Trump. And there's just not enough time left in the campaign to properly introduce her to the public. Michelle Obama, now, of course, she has both the name recognition and popularity to defeat Trump handedly, I think. But would she run? And no, I don't think so. If you've read her memoir, you'll understand that she could barely stomach those 8 years in the White House. And, while I'm sure she's flattered, I highly doubt she has any interest in returning to the White House, like none. Now, I think the most obvious pick to be Biden's replacement is Vice President Kamala Harris. She's not my favorite politician by a long shot, but at this stage of the game, I think she's the most viable option we have and our best shot at defeating Trump in November. Now, that's all Kamala has been dreaming about and salivating about for the past 3 or 4 years is somehow becoming the first woman president. You can't tell me she hasn't thought about that. Who wouldn't in her shoes? And let's not forget, she ran for president in 2020 and was once seen as a leading contender at one point before she dropped out and endorsed Biden for president. So she's ready for this. She's primed for this moment. Publicly, though, she has to show loyalty to the president and the current nominee, but she knows Biden needs to bow out. She knows very well Joe is likely going to get trounced by Trump in November if he's on the ballot. So trust me, she's been giving this a lot of thought, and I'm sure she's already made a deal with her potential VP pick. And I'll tell you who I think that should be. Pete Buttigieg. He currently serves as our Secretary of Transportation. But if you remember, he was also a front runner for the 2020 presidential nomination. And he would be, in my opinion, a very solid choice for vice president to Kamala Harris. Just think about it. Having Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket with Buttigieg as her running mate, that would be historic, and it would hit all the marks. Women, black women, white men, gays, younger voters. Think of how historic that candidacy would be and how it would reinvigorate the Democratic base and engage younger voters who, by the way, they're not currently engaged in this election. I don't know if you've noticed. Biden and the Democrats are not engaging these young voters and focusing on issues that they care about. The racial wealth gap, brutality against Black Americans, protecting immigrants' rights, environment and climate change, student loan debt. And that's another thing. Why can't Biden find a way to cancel student loan debt? If we can bend over backwards monetarily and militarily to help Ukraine, who, by the way, has not done anything that I can remember to help us, but wants to come over here and lobby our government to fund their war, when I believe they had an opportunity to join NATO decades ago, but they chose to remain neutral. And so now they want to beg for everybody's help. So, please. But why are we so quick to run to everyone else's aid all over the world, but we find every excuse not to lift our own people up? There are millions of people out there who are crippled with student loan debt. I'm one of them. Thankfully, I can afford to repay my student loans, but what about the millions of others in our country? Many of them still in their 20s. They're just starting out in their careers, or they're working in the gig economy so they can have the flexibility to have a life, and not be a slave to these corporations who want to work the hell out of you and without any semblance of a work-life balance. And I'll tell you something else. If Trump wanted to cancel student loans, I bet you he would find a way to do it. But Biden, he's been so-called canceling student debt now for 3-4 years. Nothing substantive has materialized. And the little that has, the courts have shot it down. So, watching our president try to lead has almost been like watching a disabled person try to climb a flight of stairs. It's been an ordeal. But anyway, let's say we were to move forward with Kamala as our nominee. How would that take shape? Well, one thing, Biden could potentially announce that he's stepping down as the Democratic nominee for the 2024 presidential election, essentially retiring at the end of his first term. He could then endorse Kamala as the nominee, and she'll be formally nominated by the DNC at the convention next month. That's one way. Another way this could play out, and this would be my recommendation. We all see the shape that Joe Biden is in physically and cognitively. I'm not being cruel, but sometimes you just have to call a thing. Joe could step down from his duties as president, citing medical or health reasons, and he could then transfer executive power to Kamala Harris. This happened back when Dwight Eisenhower was president. That's how Nixon became president. But in this particular case, Kamala Harris would then have to complete the rest of Joe's current term. And then she would be able to run as an incumbent president against Trump in November to become duly elected as President-elect Kamala Harris when her first term starts in January of next year, right? So if Biden were to step down as president, then Kamala would become, of course, president, and then she would be on the ballot in November, along with Trump. I feel that Kamala would easily beat Trump. Biden running against Trump, it would be a very long night. And I would hate for him to have to end his legacy and political career by having to concede victory to Trump on November 5th. I would really, really hate that for him. That would be a sad day, not only for Joe Biden, but it would be an even sadder day for our democracy. But for our country's sake, I really hope that we take a real honest assessment of the political landscape that we're in. And I'm talking directly to the Democratic leadership here. You guys need to put politics and pride aside, put keeping up appearances aside, and have an honest and frank discussion with our president and urge him to step down, do the right thing and step down. We need to start coalescing behind Kamala Harris, who would be our best shot. We need to start coalescing behind her as the Democratic nominee for president. However you guys want to do it, formally nominate her at the DNC or have Joe transfer executive power, however, but we need to make sure that we win this campaign. If we don't, I'm afraid that we're in for some really tumultuous times in this country. And that's going to be on your conscience as the Democratic leadership in this country, and on the conscience of people who supported and voted for Trump. But as for me, I've done my part. I'm doing my part. So we'll see what happens over the next few months and on Election Day. But until then, everybody stay safe. Pray for our nation. Pray for our nation's leaders. And remember to keep your trust and faith in the Lord and not man. So that's our show for tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to join us for the next episode, which will air on Wednesday, July 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Good night, everybody.